Hi and welcome to this week's Renewable Roundup from Zeigo Network. I'm Russell Redding, and this week I'm very lucky to have Ethan Cox joining me. And Ethan's going to be hopefully talking about some of the buyer trends that he's seen in North America. And I'm hoping he's even going to give us an insight to some of the data itself. So let's get stuck in. Hey Ethan, thanks for joining me this week. It's great to have you here. How are you doing?
Hey Russell, great to be here. Doing great. Excited to join you for the discussion today.
Excellent, it's good stuff. Thanks very much. So I'm going to get stuck in. I know that you've been looking at a lot of data in the US, and you've been looking at some of the trends and things. And I'd be interested if you had any thoughts about what kind of buyer trends you've seen in North America around 2025.
I certainly do. So just quick plug for the Zygo platform here. Part of my job is just to be collecting publicly announced PPAs across the market for both the US and in Europe. So definitely familiar with what trends we're seeing across just the broader market, as well as what Schneider Electric is doing. So certainly happy to talk about it. Got some stats to pull up here. For those who are not too familiar with the North American market, ERCOT, or Texas, I should say, Texas's independent grid is really the hottest spot for corporate PPAs throughout 2025 and in the previous years before it. So around 50%, if what we were tracking is 50% in terms of megawatts for corporate PPAs. We're signed in ERCOT, so that's a big one to start off with, as well as other things in terms of hyperscalers and wind versus solar splits. I could rattle off some data for you, but I think I'll start with the 50% being in ERCOT is certainly something to hang out on first.
So that's quite a heavy focus, isn't it? And I suppose that I mean, and I'm going to be honest with you, I don't have the stats, but that's probably quite analogous to Europe and Spain, where Spanish solar is dominating the market. There's bit of stuff going on in Germany, wind in Finland maybe, but that's where everyone looks. And I'm assuming that ERCOT, I'm going to show my ignorance, but again, I'm assuming that a lot of those PPAs and the megawatts are going to have been solar, because basically Texas is just a great place and it's coming together of grid access, great levels of solar irradiation, good efficiency, and good pricing, and that's causing that. Does that seem fair?
Absolutely, great production profiles for Texas solar. Excellent comparison with Spain there. Tons of land to develop projects on, but we also see a lot of wind projects out in Texas as well. Very friendly to develop both technologies out in Texas. So yeah, certainly friendly for wind as much as solar, but I think as most people on this that are listening to this will know, it's a lot easier to develop solar over wind projects, and Texas being the hotspot for development, we just see a lot of development companies setting up shop and developing projects out there. So lots of volume in general for both technologies, but particularly solar, just because of the ease to develop.
Yeah, it makes sense. Again, I found it as my role's expanded and I've been looking at the US more and working with you guys more. I found it really interesting to kind of get into these things and to see the parallels. And you're absolutely right. Solar seems to be quicker and easier and cheaper to deploy, so you're just seeing more of it. Maybe slightly unfortunately, of course, it only produces when the sun shines, which means we do get some strange effects in terms of all this peak day energy and nothing overnight, and certainly in Europe less in the winter and what have you. So it's not ideal, but it's really interesting. So having talked about solar quite a lot, where would you say wind deals have been going in 2025? Do you think they're holding their own against the solar or declining?
I would say they're declining, and then our data on the deal detective on the platform here, it backs it up. So I pulled some stats prior to hopping on the call here. From what we're tracking from publicly announced uh, press releases, is out of all the megawatts that were announced across North America last year, so ERCOT included into this, just 6.5% of those megawatts were wind deals. This is
Wow.
a reduction, a significant reduction, and we've seen it tick down over time. So um, let's jump back to 2023 for a second. Just 2 years prior, it was 30% of the
Wow.
whole market, and then it stepped down half of that to 15% about in 2024, and then down even further to 6.5 in 2025. So yeah, we're definitely seeing it tick down in both announced deals and also from what we're tracking. My job working with developers so frequently, we're seeing less wind offers coming in general over that time span as well.
Wow, that's amazing. I'm going to have to say I'm going to go for a deliberate pun. This is unusual for me, but it looks like there are serious headwinds for wind
Oh,
projects. Oh, it's terrible. I'm so sorry. I apologize to you and to listeners for that one. But have you got any views? What lies kind of behind that?
yeah. I mentioned a minute ago about just the more difficulty to develop with wind. So there's it's easy to drop a very large scale solar project onto a very large plot of land. Easy to do that in Texas. Much more difficult with solar or with wind. You need a lot more land and the transmission, of course, as well. So I've this goes back to my days as a developer. I sort of developed a theory of all the good land got snapped up really early, even unfortunately before the turbine technology is where it's at today. So you look at places like Texas and like the really windy Great Plains area of Kansas and Nebraska and those places. There's a lot of good land that got wind farms placed on them at like the 2010s or so, or maybe even earlier than that, where the turbines were around like a megawatt or a megawatt and a half um, per uh, per turbine per machine. And really wish we could have waited a little bit on that and dropped down the big behemoths of 5 megawatts and above machines that we're using today. So that's one aspect. I think a lot of just usable land across the country got snapped up pretty early, so we're sort of working with a finite amount of land. But then there's the other angle here of just the regulatory pressures and costs to develop with EPC agreements and just capex expenditures of all varieties. There, we look at what the Trump administration has done with the introduction of tariffs about this time last year, and then as well as the One Big Beautiful Act that was announced on July 4th of this past year that really attacked the tax credits that are available to both wind and solar, but certainly is an attack on wind. And then the third piece that I've been hearing from developers, just administrative work and the regulatory hurdles that you have to jump through for wind already were tough to begin with, but we're seeing stricter requirements from the FAA or the Federal Aviation Administration to get those the BNH, the designation of no hazard permits for wind projects. That's become tougher through the Trump administration, as well as any wind deals that were being developed on public land. The federal permit process through that way is also difficult from an environmental and land use standpoint. So lots of, as you say, headwinds against the wind market right now, or wind developers right now. So it's no surprise when you sort of look at it through those lenses of why we're seeing less deals or less offers coming in from developers and translating into less deals overall in the market.
So Thanks, Ethan. That's really interesting, because I think I look at some of the headlines, and obviously, you see like Ørsted struggling because they're halfway through building an offshore wind farm, and the administration says, "Whoa, stop! No." And yes, there's a court battle that goes on, and the judge says, "Well, you can keep building while we sort this out," and obviously that's hurt them. But I hadn't necessarily fully taken in, some of the things, how it all stacks up. The FAA permits, and I mean, I've seen that in the UK with the CAA, the Civil Aviation Authority, saying, no, that's going to really mess that radar up. You need to do this or that, or but you kind of, you don't realize how all these things stack up, and it almost goes back to people look at it and go, why would I go through all that pain to build this wind when literally, I can get on with doing this solar here, and I don't have to have an FAA permit, and I don't have all these worries. So I kind of get it. But it's really interesting to hear it actually laid out like that. So thanks. One of the things, I talked about, obviously, the things we see. So things I see, and then sometimes the headlines, and you see a lot of headlines about the hyperscalers, the Googles and the Metas, and the Amazons and Microsoft of this world, and it all been about data center and AI and demand growth. Is that something you think is driving the PPA market? Are we kind of seeing that evidence?
100%. I think they're absolutely in the driver's seat of the PPA market, and here in North America. We're just the big four names. I think you mentioned Google, Meta, Microsoft, and Amazon, really eating up so much of the corporate PPA that we're tracking here. It just in a single term, insatiable appetite comes to mind. They cannot be stopped, and they cannot buy power quick enough to fill their needs for the data and the energy that they're consuming. So, taking it back to the deal detective tool on the Zeigo platform, we tracked 71% of all corporate PPAs in terms of megawatts were announced from these hyperscaler buyers last year, and we're including some non-big tech or non of those big four hyperscalers as well, and Schneider Electric represents a good portion of those who are in the data center space but are not aggressively building out many data centers across the country as that. But hyperscalers and data center types of buyers are really like I mentioned, they are in the driver's seat right now for the North American PPA landscape.
Yeah, it's amazing to hear in numbers like that. I know my team, and to be fair, I have been looking at the sort of the hyperscaler trend, and we've been doing work on the what's going on and where they're looking, and the buying trends that they do and how they do, but it's evolving. It's evolving so quickly. Sometimes it's hard to keep up. We looked at various things, and you kind of get a story. There's one table where we've kind of saying, oh well, Google superpower is they do this, and they kind of have like an integrated sort of this, that I'm looking for a supplier does everything, and Meta's might be, and I can't remember exactly what it was, but something like they've gone to some of the higher carbon grids first, and so on and so forth, and then suddenly Amazon buys this massive solar and storage project in Oregon. And goes, yeah, you know what? We're going to do this ourselves because we've built data centers, we've built distribution. We can build, we can manage projects. We're good with data. We can do all the things we need to do. We just need a bit of certain expertise to get this done. And suddenly everything you think shifts a little bit more, because, as you quite rightly said, they're all looking for where can I get power quickly, and how can I get it to fuel my AI expansion and my data center expansion. Because actually, I still haven't got to the answer to the question is, it might not be who has the best algorithm or AI, but it might be who can get the power and build the data centers and have the capacity and capability almost to to run at speed. So that's really interesting. So to move us on a little bit, obviously we talk about hyperscalers. What would you say you're seeing with non-hyperscalers, Ethan? What are their motivations? What are they looking at?
Yeah, uh, the best deal they can find, I think, is the short way to put it. So we're seeing. I think, let me take it back to hyperscalers just to give you to frame up more context for the non-hyperscalers. So the hyperscalers are willing to. They're very sophisticated. So the big four names that I mentioned a minute ago, they all have their own internal PPA, I guess, advisory and evaluation groups. So they're not going to folks like Schneider Electric to do their own PPAs. They are very sophisticated. They've done many PPAs before, and so they know what they're looking for. And their portfolios are very diverse. They've done PPAs across all the major markets in North America, and just because the budgets are higher, they're willing to pay a price premium for projects closer to their load. And I think this is the most important bit when we take it to the non-hyperscalers is that um, they non-hyperscalers are really putting the V in the virtual PPA here in North America, where they are not uh, prioritizing load proximity with where the project is that they are investing in with their PPA. So uh, they're like I said, using that virtual piece as much as they can, and therefore they're considering offers from all markets across North America, really, whether their corporate load might be in Virginia or something, or but they're looking for the best deal possible. And time again, we're seeing ERCOT be where that deal is. So when you look at where non-hyperscalers are signing deals, it's very concentrated in Texas, in ERCOT, just because the prices there are better, and it's just where you can get the best value for deals right
Mm,
now.
yeah, that kind of makes a lot of sense, and I think I'm probably going slightly back in a circle when I talk about Europe and Spain.
Mhm.
When you see VPPAs, it for a long time has been dominated by Spain, Spanish solar, because the financials are so great. A bit like ERCOT.
Mhm.
It becomes hard to do something somewhere else. But one of the trends I think we're beginning to see is perhaps corporates thinking a little bit more about their future proofing their portfolios, balancing their portfolios. So maybe they're thinking about other locations and other technologies now a bit more. And I think the changes for me, the changes in the GHG protocol guidance could exacerbate that, because not because of necessarily the hourly matching or anything like that, but the tight locality that they're potentially setting, which could
Yes.
be price zones, it could be countries, but in the US is likely, I think, to be states or ISOs,
Mhm.
could actually shift things a bit. And then I kind of sit and I look at America. I mean, I look at North America and I think, well, if AI keeps growing and it's hoovering up all the power demand is once again increasing. There's a push that says the V is falling off the PPAs. These non-hyperscalers are still going to need to do something, and you know maybe what's going to come around, and I'd be interested on your thoughts on this, is um, the prices go up, so suddenly PPA start to make sense again, and
Mhm.
but the V's gone, so it can't just be in ERCOT. It's got to be closer to me, and so the market shifts again. Is that something you could see as a scenario, or do you think maybe differently?
Yeah, I certainly see it as a possibility. You know, the GHG protocol changes are one of the biggest drivers for what we're seeing corporates uh, base their decisions on right now in 2026. Like along with the expiration of tax credits right now, we're seeing a lot of urgency in corporate buyers as to just to rush and get deals signed, with tax credits while they're still here before the rules kick in with the from the big beautiful bill. But as well, mentioned GHG protocol. changes. Like we still don't know the exact ruling of what it will be. The comment period in North America was I think closed 2 weeks ago, end of January. So we're still waiting for the next set of what the ruling will be and timelines and such. But right now it does kind of feel like a gold rush, if you will, for the good projects, for corporates, I should say, to enter into PPAs with the best deal they could possibly find with projects with the tax credits, as well as before the GHG protocol changes kick into effect, because there's a very strong sense that there will be a grandfathering clause in that whenever the new GHG protocol changes take in. So that was only part of your question. I know the real question there was what happens once they become into effect. And seeing it as a mixed bag from my colleagues on the Schneider side, where let's just say the fact is that the GHG protocol rules are voluntary. They're not. It's not a complete federal regulation to adhere to those guidelines. So there certainly is some chatter amongst the group that there will be some corporates out there that break away from GHG protocol and don't follow those rules. So to what extent from corporates, we're not sure. It could be 50-50. It could be swing one direction or the other. Like I'm not quite sure. I think we're in a little bit of a gray area there, but it will certainly help the corporates that do decide to stick with the GHG protocol guidance. It's great news for the renewables market in I guess all the non-ERCOT markets, I should say, because it will force corporates to do PPAs closer to their load, and it does I guess bode well for your MISO and PJM and SPP types of markets, which when we look at corporate appetite and deal trends across those markets in the past few years, it's really been vast majority of those hyperscaler buyers doing deals there. So definitely will change the buyer mentality, but just to what extent? Just because the GHG protocol is a voluntary thing. So
yeah. That's really interesting. Again, I think that there's some really good points and some interesting bits about how it can evolve. So thanks for that. I think one of the interesting things that came out of it is you talked about gold rush, corporates wanting to sign deals, and I'm sort of playing things back in our head. You talked about grandfathering in GHG. You talked about the good wind projects that are there now to be had. And you can kind of see why there might be a bit of a gold rush to pick up some new builds. I'm conscious time's marching on, and I do have one sort of last question, if that's all right. In terms of we talked about the sort of generic trends and volume trends and some of the motivations. I'd be interested if you've got any sort of comments about the sort of pricing of offers. To me, it seems like if there is a gold rush, there's quite a lot happening because of tariffs and the OBBA and what have you. Has the market heated up? Have we seen prices rising? Or have there been a glut of projects and corporates are sort of sat there going, "Hey, I'm driving prices down." How's it kind of been over the last sort of year, last months?
Yeah, it certainly is something that everyone's keeping their eye on these days. Throughout 2025, with the introduction of tariffs and the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, we definitely saw some developers. When we look at macro level prices, we saw an inflation sort of a larger than normal increase because when you look at the past few years, I think most markets in North America have been trending along the same sort of consistent trend line of around, I don't know, 2 to 3%, more or less, like consistently. So you could draw trend lines pretty straight, but through the middle parts of last year, we did see a higher spike than normal in prices, just due to a bit of a harsher reaction to tariffs and the OBBA. But as I was keeping my eyes on this as we ended the year, so going from Q3 into Q4, the changes, the rate of change definitely cooled off. In some cases, we saw prices actually drop in PJM. So we sort of tabled off, I guess, to end in 2025. And then as we look out, we mentioned tax credit expiration. This is a huge thing for what developers are pricing into for the future and what corporates are looking for. From what I'm seeing right now, we're not seeing a major spike in developers raising their price a substantial amount just due to the tax credit expiration. So just because historically we get Schneider Electric gets their offers from projects for ones with a COD of 1 to 3 years out. So the projects that we're seeing right now being bid into RFPs have the assumption that they're going to be receiving those tax credits. So still the same case, or the case remains the same, that we're seeing projects with the tax credits expiration. So if you're waiting for me to say something along the lines of we're getting a massive spike of prices because the tax credits are going away, we're not seeing that yet, and that's a long way of saying all of that. But so still TBD on that front.
I love it. Ethan, it's just brilliant. Thank you. I just want to say thank you so much for joining me this week. It's been really, really interesting. So thank you.
Yeah, no, happy to be here. Could chat all day about this. This has been great. Super interesting and unprecedented moment of the renewables journey that we're all finding ourselves in right now. And happy to talk through it with you. You're always a pleasure.
Awesome. I've loved it. We should do it again. And what I'd say to anyone who's listening is if you actually, if you want to know more and you want to benefit from some of Ethan's incredible knowledge and experience and the data, reach out to him and get in touch. He can tell you what he can tell you, or he can tell you how Zeigo Network works as well, which is great. So I'm going to wrap up there. Ethan, you've been an absolute star. Thank you very much.
Of course. Thank you, Russell.